Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings, to the WeAreChange news show. And do you ever feel like things are quickening, moving too fast for you to even catch up on, as the government is spying on you, trying to control you, while the corporations rob and loot you blind with the big banks, and we're facing the oncoming doom of civilization and humanity with the latest technological advancements and artificial intelligence? Well, don't worry. It's all going to be okay. That's why we do these news broadcasts, so you could be kept up to date with the latest breaking important news that actually affects you. And oh yeah, we also have a t-shirt store that's going to be open for 5 more days, and if you want to give someone a gift for Christmas and support real independent media, check out the link in the description below. Sorry, I had to. Okay, now, moving forward with the latest news. The first thing I wanted to talk about today is a major decision by the Trump administration that is stating that they will, quote, let Bashar al-Assad, the president of Syria, stay in power. Well, of course, until the next election in Syria, which will be in 2021. This news, as well as Putin running for re-election, will give us a bunch of news to cover on this YouTube channel, so definitely stay tuned. But of course, this news is not a surprise to everyone because the United States was really left without many options on this major decision. And even with the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, still saying that there is no future peace process with Bashar Assad as president, we do have to admit that the United States has been outmaneuvered, especially by Russia, in that key geopolitical strategic region of Syria. Now, with the Syrian government aligned with Iran, Hezbollah, and the Russian government, expect more turbulence in the region, especially with the latest controversy that's happening right now in Israel, which of course we have been following very closely and only expect the situation to get worse. And even though Vladimir Putin just days ago inside of Syria declared victory against ISIS and Western-backed rebels, the United States, along with Saudi Arabia and Israel, are still poised at deterring the influence of their enemies in that region. So, yeah, that's happening. And now, of course, the most talked about news story in the United States is about how a Democrat has won a special election in Alabama yesterday against a scandal-ridden accused pedophile, Roy Moore, who both had the support of Steve Bannon and Donald Trump himself. Seeing record high turnouts for the Democrats, we saw a huge turnout from African Americans that has turned a primarily Republican Senate seat to a Democrat. And to be honest with you, I don't give a damn. Now, of course, a lot of people are talking about how the Republicans are having less of a majority in the Senate, and that's a big deal, and I may be wrong, but I don't see what the big deal about all this huffing and puffing is all about, because even with Donald Trump having the majority in the House and Senate being Republicans, he has still failed at major legislative issues. And he really hasn't kept his campaign promises. I mean, he promised to repeal Obamacare. He provided Obamacare Light, which the Republicans even threw out. Him and Steve Bannon actually promised real tax reform that would benefit the people against the 1%. Promised tax reform that would help the average American, stick it to the hedge fund managers, cutting the corporate tax rate, a freelance tax cut for the middle class, and that's not really happening now. And if you look at his foreign policy, it's worse than Obama's. He's increasing the drone strikes, increasing U.S. operations in Africa, and entangling the United States with Israel's and Saudi Arabia's interests more than ever. And I'm sorry, but it's hard not to see Trump for the actual actions that he is committing, not just what he is saying. And yes, he has some deep state opponents, which we will get into later in this video. And yes, there's some internal drama that is usually based on ego. But unless someone could convince me otherwise, I still believe that the left and right are here to mainly divide us and to distract us from the real issues that actually affect us. So that's why I really don't care about this election and this guy, Doug Jones, who will actually have to act like a Republican if he expects to actually win a re-election in a very right-wing state like Alabama. So on many levels, I just don't see any difference here. Plus, I think running an accused pedophile wasn't a great idea. And it was very interesting seeing major figures on the right call out sexual abuse and harassment when it happened on the left. But when it happened on the right, they were like, oh, let's investigate this. And in reality, seeing these allegations of pedophilia and sexual harassment being politicized was really offsetting. Because in reality, if we truly do care about the issue of pedophilia and sexual harassment, we would treat every case seriously, investigating it, not jumping to conclusions, listening to both sides, and trying to get to the bottom of things. And you do have to admit, Roy Moore had a horrible defense against all the allegations against him. And him and the Republicans definitely did not do themselves a favor by picking him as the person to take over Jeff Sessions' Senate seat. But hey, if you think I'm totally wrong, let me know in the comment section below. I have an open mind. I could be convinced otherwise with your comments and feedback. So, moving forward, in other pedophilia news, we of course have the latest developments from the Dennis Hassard case. By the way, he was the former Speaker of the House in the United States, who was charged and convicted of trying to cover up and buy out 5 boys that he molested when he was a high school teacher in Illinois. And very interestingly, he was never convicted of pedophilia, but only trying to cover up the pedophilia. And now, in a recent court decision, he has been banned from being alone with minors and not permitted to be in the presence of any child. Well, at least the court got that right. Moving forward, in other politically connected underage sex scandals, we are now finding out that opposition research on Donald Trump, the Fusion GPS dossier that was built on Donald Trump, tried to connect him with the Lolita Express and accused pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. And they failed to make any connections to Donald Trump or even any evidence of a close relationship between the two. Which, hey, we call it fairly here, is good on Trump, especially since Jeffrey Epstein was connected with very high political figures like Bill Clinton and also actors like Kevin Spacey. What is the saying here? Birds of a feather flock together or something like that? I don't know, I got that wrong. But you know what I'm trying to say. And in other news that vindicates Donald Trump, we are finding out that FBI officials actually discussed an insurance policy against Donald Trump's presidency and actually insulted him and made fun of him when that FBI agent was part of the Russian investigation on Donald Trump and on Hillary Clinton's emails investigation. So yeah, there definitely is a lot of clear bias against Donald Trump in this whole Russian probe investigation, which, by the way, we've been calling before and after this election completely fake news and irrelevant. I mean, you could just take a look at Donald Trump's foreign policy and see that there actually isn't any collusion with Russia, even though he promised to work with them to defeat ISIS and then didn't. There's definitely a lot of collusion with Israel, which no one wants to talk about. And while the Democratic establishment and mainstream media distract us with this, we're not paying attention to the real issues that are actually happening in this world. So yeah, on this issue, Donald Trump is vindicated. Now, the second most talked about news story today is, of course, net neutrality, as we are facing 0 hour for net neutrality rules to repeal it this Thursday, as the FCC is expected to approve their chairman's proposal. Now, of course, there's a lot to know about this issue. I'm going to leave this article, savetheinternet.com, in our sources on our Steemit post, so you could fact check everything yourself. But in short, what these FCC changes would do would allow ISPs to have the power to have a fast lane for some websites if they pay, and a not so fast lane for other websites. This, of course, has many people on the internet up in arms, as the hashtag net neutrality is trending #1 on Twitter right now as we're speaking. And even with massive backlash, we are still seeing cable and broadcast news networks largely ignore the outcry that we are seeing on the internet. Now, with that factor and the factor that the United States has paid $400 billion in taxpayer money to provide fiber optic internet to the United States, with that infrastructure not being utilized, along with the factor that more than 100 million Americans could only get internet service from companies that have violated net neutrality, which violates the free market, and what all these factors, clearly what the FCC is proposing is not a good thing. Now, people, of course, are recommending people download the Tor browser in order to make the internet a more level playing field, so you could hide your internet traffic from ISPs. And even with the demand of the people being very clear, this is still a toss-up issue, especially with the influence of large corporations when it comes to our government. Like we've seen a couple months ago, where our government gave ISPs the right to sell our internet history to private companies. An issue that the majority of Americans were against, but yet it was still approved by the government. So yeah, whatever happens, we will, of course, be following it very closely. And now moving forward with more personal life kind of stories, let's talk about drugs. And no, not the fun ones, the pharmaceutical ones. As we're finding out, in the United States, a drug company has hiked the price of an everyday vitamin pill by 800%, and a second drug by 2,500%. Now, price gouging is usually normal in our medical industrial complex society that we live in order to finance R&D, research and development, but I think this story points out to a bigger problem of how our whole medical system is entirely broken, that this even needs to happen. As a recent Harvard study finally admitted that drug prices are so high mainly because of government grants and big pharma monopolies, with the state eliminating competition, stifling innovation, and helping create the current corrupt system that we have right now, where in the United States an appendectomy is 10 times more expensive than it is in Mexico. And I don't know about you, but I see government as the big problem to big pharma that we're all facing. And it's not just high prices that we're facing, but also horrible side effects of even commonly known drugs like Tylenol, which studies have shown actually affects your empathy, suggesting that it leads to a decline of your empathy just by taking this common over-the-counter painkiller. And I literally made a video about this just a few days ago, talking about how we're having the lowest amount of empathy than ever before in the West. So with a broken, corrupt medical system and adverse side effects to many commonly known drugs, if you get a chance, take care of yourself. Work out, get some sun, get some exercise. Learn to be happy, make yourself mentally right and emotionally stable, because honestly, the cost, adversities, and side effects of not taking care of yourself right now are far too great. Trust me on this one, as I just had a medical scare myself. So yeah, just don't be a dumbass, because the medical system is just one system of a control grid that siphons off wealth from the people and gives it to the very few. Seriously, right now, just like start working out. Trust me, it makes you feel good. Oh, look at those sweat pits. You got one life. Make sure you live it well. And yeah, that concludes today's news broadcast. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, share it with your friends and family members. If you're missing a shirt for some reason, check out our t-shirt store on teesprings.com, which of course also supports this independent media broadcast and makes videos like this possible. And that's why I love you. Thank you again so much for watching. Stay tuned for more.